"Excuse me, ma'am. This section is for first-class passengers only." The flight attendant's fingers stabbed the air, pointing directly at Clara Washington's chest. Her voice was loud enough to silence the cabin. Passengers in designer suits paused mid-sip, turning to watch the drama unfold. Clara, 74, stood frozen beside seat 2A, clutching her boarding pass like a lifeline. "This is my seat," she replied calmly, but the sneer on the attendant's face said it all. "You don't belong here." What no one knew was that Clara's son wasn't just any passenger. He was the man who could bring down the entire airline. The cabin doors had just opened when Clara Washington stepped into first class. Her floral print dress fluttered slightly as she adjusted the strap of her modest handbag. Her eyes scanned the luxurious interior, wide with cautious wonder. Rich leather pods lined the aisle, glowing softly under ambient lighting. It smelled of fresh linen, citrus, and expensive expectations. Passengers were already seated, cradling champagne flutes and flipping through menus written in cursive gold. Some glanced up, some smiled, some stared. Clara felt the weight of their glances. Not cruel, not yet, but appraising, curious, uncertain. She wasn't dressed like them. Her shoes were practical. Her hair, a silver halo of soft curls, was styled with dignity, not dollars. Her skin, creased by time and kissed by heritage, stood out in a sea of pale perfection. Clutching her boarding pass, Clara walked slowly toward seat 2A. Then it happened. A voice, crisp and sharp, pierced the cabin. "Excuse me, ma'am. This section is for first-class passengers only." It was a tone not meant to clarify, but to command. Clara turned. A tall blonde woman in a pristine navy blue uniform stood 3 feet away. Arm extended, finger pointed directly at Clara's chest. Her name tag read Lindsay Myers. Her eyes were an arctic shade of blue, unmoved by time or kindness. "I beg your pardon?" Clara said gently. "You've clearly taken a wrong turn," Lindsay snapped, lowering her hand just enough to look professional. "The economy section is behind you." A ripple spread through the cabin. Heads turned. A man in a tan Gucci blazer whispered something to his wife. Someone giggled. A phone camera flicked on with a quiet click. Clara blinked. "No, dear," she said with a patient smile. "This is my seat." She offered the boarding pass. Lindsay didn't even look at it. "Seat 2A, Clara added, holding the pass a little higher. "I said, that's not possible," Lindsay replied, her voice tightening. "These seats are extremely exclusive. If you would just step aside." "I'm not confused," Clara interrupted, still calm. "My son booked this ticket for my birthday." Lindsay's eyebrows arched, clearly unimpressed. "That's sweet. But mistakes happen. Maybe it was a gift for someone else and they accidentally entered your name." Clara stood still, her feet planted. The air around her seemed to slow. Passengers stared openly now, some feigning indifference but unable to look away. Lindsay leaned in, lowering her voice to a condescending whisper. "Look, I don't want to embarrass you, but we've had issues before, people sneaking into first class. It's policy. We protect the integrity of this space." Clara's expression didn't waver. "The integrity of a chair?" "It's not just a chair, ma'am." "Of course not. It reclines." Clara smiled, but the humor never touched her eyes. Lindsay stiffened. "If you don't cooperate, I will have to call security." "Then call them," Clara replied, her voice soft but steady. "But you should know, my son is on his way." Lindsay blinked. "Excuse me?" Clara gently settled into the seat, placing her bag under the footrest and folding her hands in her lap. "My son is coming," she said simply. That was when the murmurs began again. Not laughter this time, confusion, suspicion. What kind of son? Was he on the flight? A lawyer? Someone important? The passengers didn't know how to interpret what they'd just heard, and that made them uncomfortable. Lindsay looked momentarily thrown off, but her pride was too thick to retreat. "Do you think threats will get you into this seat?" she hissed. "Because we've seen this kind of stunt before. Some internet prank or protest." Clara didn't respond. She simply opened her handbag, pulled out a slim book of poetry, Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, and began to read. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. Lindsay lingered for a moment, unsure of what to do next, then turned and stormed down the aisle, heels clicking like accusations. As she disappeared into the galley, a few passengers released breath they didn't know they were holding. Behind her, Clara flipped a page. She had not fought. She had not begged. She had simply stayed. And yet, something about her presence unsettled the entire cabin. Up near the flight deck, Lindsay pulled out her service tablet, jaw clenched. She searched the manifest again, impatiently tapping the screen. There it was. Clara Washington, Seat 2A, verified. Priority clearance code, A5. Her thumb hovered above the screen. A5? She muttered. That code was usually reserved for senior executives, diplomats, or, her eyes widened, a partner family member. But no, that couldn't be right. She clicked deeper. There it was. Issued by M. Washington, exec. Her breath hitched. "No way," she whispered. A soft voice behind her said, "Everything all right, Lindsay?" It was Maria, one of the junior attendants. "I've got it handled," Lindsay snapped. Maria raised a brow, then glanced down the aisle toward Clara's seat. "She seems nice," Maria said carefully. "Polite." Lindsay didn't reply. Instead, she shoved the tablet into its dock and plastered on a smile. "Let's begin pre-departure service." Back in the cabin, the buzz had quieted, but the unease lingered. Clara kept her eyes on the page, but she wasn't reading anymore. She could feel the tension in the air, the side eyes, the shame, the subtle panic in Lindsay's movements. It had begun. She closed the book gently, reached for her phone, and opened her contacts. At the top of the list was a name. Malcolm. She didn't press call. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, "Soon." The soft hum of the aircraft's cabin faded behind Clara's thoughts. Though she sat firmly in seat 2A, her mind had drifted far from the leather seat and ambient lights. Her fingers gently traced the edge of the closed poetry book on her lap. Still, I Rise. The title alone had pulled her through more moments of pain than she could count. She closed her eyes, and with that, she was no longer on the plane. She was 22 again, standing in the poorly lit maternity ward of Mercy General Hospital in Harlem, wearing thin-soled shoes and a too-loose uniform. Her hands, steady even when her heart wasn't, cradled a newborn still slippery with the miracle of life. The mother, a pale woman from out of town, was crying, not in pain, but relief. She had nearly bled out, but Clara had stepped in. The doctor had been late. The machines were failing. The woman was losing blood too fast, but Clara didn't wait. She had wrapped her arms around the process and willed life into both child and mother. They survived. The baby had been small, blue-eyed, screaming with vigor, and the mother had clutched Clara's hand afterward, sobbing, saying, "You saved us." She never saw them again. But now, sitting here, Clara's memory sharpened. The woman had introduced herself, Margaret Myers. Clara's eyes opened slowly, her breath catching as the pieces slid into place. Myers. Her gaze drifted up the aisle, toward the galley where Lindsay had vanished moments before. It couldn't be. Could it? A twist of fate? A cruel irony? Or maybe karma playing the long game? Clara had once brought Lindsay into the world, and now, decades later, Lindsay tried to push Clara out of it, at least out of this part of it. The part reserved for the worthy, the wealthy, the white. But Clara didn't feel angry. Not yet. Mostly, she felt tired. Her thoughts wandered again, now to Malcolm, her son. Raising him had been a lifetime of silent negotiations with the world. After her husband, Henry, died in a warehouse accident when Malcolm was just 3, Clara didn't have time to grieve. Bills needed paying. Her child needed food, school, guidance. She had returned to work within a week, taking double shifts in the delivery ward. By day, she swaddled strangers' babies. By night, she read Malcolm stories, sang him lullabies until her voice cracked. She'd taught him to dream big, but live honest. He had always been a curious child, asking questions far too mature for his age. "Mama, why do we live here? Why don't you sleep more? Why don't they listen to you when you talk?" At first, she didn't know how to answer. Eventually, she told him the truth in pieces, that some people look at skin before character, that some folks measure worth in money or manners, and they miss the real treasure hidden in ordinary hearts. Malcolm listened. He studied. He worked. He got into Columbia on scholarship, then Stanford for his MBA. Each graduation, Clara wore her Sunday best and cried into her gloves. She never fully understood what corporate restructuring meant, but when her son became the youngest black CEO in the history of Polaris Airlines, the newspaper headline made her feel like maybe, just maybe, the world had finally heard her whisper. Clara shifted in her seat. It was easy to forget, in moments like this, how hard the road had been. There was the night her house had flooded from a broken pipe. Malcolm was 9. They spent 2 weeks in a shelter while she fought with the insurance company. There was the time a doctor she worked under had taken credit for her idea during an emergency delivery, only to be promoted for it. There were the small daily indignities, being called "girl" by younger white nurses, asked to clean spills that weren't hers, mistaken for housekeeping even in her scrubs. Clara had endured, not because she had no fight, but because her fight was precise, quiet, calculated. Her dignity was her resistance, her silence a strategy, her endurance a weapon. She looked down at her hands now, aged but still firm. These hands had caught hundreds of babies, some born into love, some into chaos. She remembered each cry, each mother's face. And now one of those babies had grown up to point a finger in her face and tell her she didn't belong. Clara wasn't sure whether to laugh or weep. What would Margaret Myers say if she knew? Would she remember Clara's voice, calming her between contractions? Would she recall the hand that held hers as the world tilted on the edge of death and birth? Did Lindsay even know her own origin? Perhaps not. Perhaps she was born into comfort and forgotten struggle. Perhaps she had grown up thinking first class was her birthright. That power lived in uniforms, and decency could be doled out based on appearance. But Clara had seen people stripped of everything, money, vanity, confidence, at their most vulnerable moments. When a baby comes, no one is better than anyone else. In the face of new life, every soul is bare, equal. That's why she loved the work. That's why she never regretted a single night spent under hospital fluorescents. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" It was Maria, the younger flight attendant. Her tone was hesitant, kind. Clara smiled. "No, thank you, dear." Maria lingered. I saw what happened. I just want to say, I'm sorry." Clara nodded. "You didn't do anything wrong, but maybe I should have," Maria whispered, then quickly walked away. Clara returned her gaze to the book in her lap. She hadn't needed this seat to prove her worth, but still, it meant something, that her son had given her this, not just as a gift, but as a symbol, a reclamation, and no one, not even a child she once saved, had the right to take it away. The cabin resumed its pre-flight buzz, but a cold edge had crept into the air. Clara remained still in her seat, spine straight, eyes lowered to the book in her lap. Though the pages remained open, her mind wandered far from Maya Angelou's verses. She could feel it all, without looking. The looks, the whispers, the judgment, and the silence. Lindsay returned from the galley not with drinks, not with service, but with a new posture, shoulders pulled back, chin high, as if she had just received military orders to preserve the sanctity of first class. She passed Clara's row without stopping. No greeting, no towel, no champagne. Instead, she pivoted gracefully at row 1, bent slightly, and offered a beaming smile to a middle-aged man in a designer sports coat. "Mr. Sullivan," she cooed, "would you prefer Perrier or Dom before takeoff?" The man chuckled, his voice full of casual arrogance. "Champagne, of course. It's too early for humility." Lindsay laughed, too loud, too fake, and poured. Clara kept her eyes on the text before her. But the heat crawling up her chest wasn't from the cabin temperature. It was from the intentional exclusion, the calculated invisibility she was being wrapped in. The cart rolled down the aisle, pausing for each guest, except her. No eye contact, no menu, no offer of even a glass of water. Clara waited, silently. A few rows behind, someone noticed. "Excuse me," a voice called out. Lindsay turned, surprised. It was a woman, mid-30s, dark hair in a neat bun, navy blazer, reading glasses perched on her nose. She wasn't flashy like the others, but her voice carried authority. "Why didn't you offer her anything?" the woman asked, motioning toward Clara. Lindsay blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I watched you skip her," the woman pressed. "That's not standard, is it?" Lindsay straightened, smile frozen. "Ma'am, I'm sure you misunderstood. We follow strict procedures." The woman arched a brow. "Then I'd like a copy of those procedures." A tense silence followed. Clara glanced back, met the woman's eyes, and gave her the faintest smile. A silent thank you. Lindsay's face darkened. "Would you like to switch seats with her?" she said, voice laced with venom. "You seem quite invested." The woman didn't blink. "If I thought she needed my seat, I'd give it gladly." That was when Mr. Sullivan decided to chime in. He sipped his champagne, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Oh, come on," he said, smirking. "Let's not turn this into a social justice protest. It's a flight, not a soapbox." His words hung in the air like the scent of spoiled cologne. Clara didn't flinch. She looked up and spoke, voice soft but razor sharp. "I've seen that expression before, a long time ago, in a waiting room, in a courthouse, in a hospital. You all wear it the same." The cabin fell silent. Greg chuckled nervously. "Ma'am, I don't know what you think is happening here, but you're not a martyr." "No," Clara said, folding her book closed. "Just someone who's learned when silence cuts deeper than words." Lindsay flushed. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the galley again. Erin, the woman who had spoken up, leaned forward. "That was brave," she whispered to Clara. Clara tilted her head slightly. "No, dear. Speaking up is what's brave. I've spent my whole life being silent in rooms like this." 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Lindsay didn't return. Maria, the junior attendant, began service quietly. She approached Clara, placed a glass of sparkling water on her tray, and set down a cloth napkin. "I'm sorry for the delay, ma'am," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Clara nodded. "It's not your fault." The clinking of glasses resumed. Forks met plates. The cabin began to breathe again, though the tension remained like a storm waiting offshore. Clara sipped her water, eyes briefly scanning the man across the aisle. Mr. Sullivan. Something about him scratched at her memory. The logo on his briefcase, the badge clipped to his tablet case. Sullivan Enterprises, Polaris Airlines. Her heart stilled. She had seen that name, just weeks ago, in a press release from Malcolm's office. A massive new catering and logistics contract signed with a private firm. $15 million. That was the number. She remembered because she had asked him about it. "That much money for food on a plane?" He had laughed. "It's more than food, Mama. Logistics, supply chains, sustainability metrics. It's complicated." She had asked who the man was. "A contractor named Greg Sullivan," he had said. "New money, arrogant, but efficient." Her gaze returned to the man sipping champagne without a care in the world. Greg Sullivan. Twist snapped like thunder in her chest. The man who had just mocked her, the man who saw her as a joke, was eating off a contract her son had signed. a man who profited from her child's success, but still saw her as beneath him. The irony was so thick it could suffocate. But Clara didn't speak. She turned back toward the window, where the jet bridge had begun to retract. In the galley, Lindsay braced herself against the counter, breathing hard. She tapped her tablet, checked the manifest again, and confirmed what she'd feared. Clara's ticket was fully legitimate, executive clearance, private authorization, and she had just created a scene. She stared at the screen like it might lie to her. Then she clicked open the company profile for Polaris Airlines. Her stomach dropped. CEO, Malcolm Washington. She blinked, clicked again, read the biography. Born in Harlem. Mother, Clara Washington. Her face went pale. "Oh no," she whispered. Back in the cabin, Erin opened her laptop, quietly typing notes. No one knew who she was. No one knew her outlet. But her fingers moved fast, recording every detail. The tension, the silence, the way Lindsay had spoken, the lack of service, the glances. It was all there. And if her instincts were right, this story wasn't over, not even close. In the narrow galley of the aircraft, Maria tapped at the crew manifest on her tablet. She hadn't meant to snoop, but something didn't sit right with her. She had served hundreds of first-class passengers, politicians, CEOs, celebrities, but rarely had someone been treated the way Clara had. And something about the name. It tugged at her memory like a loose thread. Maria scrolled through the internal flight notes. Alongside seat 2A, next to Clara Washington, a quiet alert blinked. Special status, A5, executive affiliate. She blinked. A5 was not just another seating class. It was a rare internal designation, one given only to guests traveling under the direct patronage of Polaris Airlines' senior leadership. It was used sparingly, usually for personal guests of the board or family. Maria's eyes widened. She leaned toward a senior attendant near the coffee machine. "Hey, check this," she whispered. "Did you see the clearance on seat 2A? The woman glanced, nodded. "Yeah, I did. Looks like someone up top really wanted her taken care of. Weird how Lindsay's treating her." Maria hesitated. "Does the name mean anything to you? Clara Washington?" The woman frowned. "Sounds familiar, but I can't place it." "I think I've heard it before too," Maria murmured, tapping her nail on the tablet. "Like in a company newsletter or something." She couldn't shake the feeling. Something about Clara's calm, her posture, her poise, felt practiced. Not defensive, but regal. As if she'd stood through storms far worse than this. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, First Officer Nolan Griffith reviewed weather patterns over the Atlantic. Smooth skies so far. Estimated arrival in Paris, on schedule. He leaned back in his chair, stretching. His eyes wandered to the pre-departure brief, where the flight manifest scrolled across the screen. And there it was again. Clara Washington, 2A, exec affiliate, Polaris priority code A5. Nolan narrowed his eyes. That name. He'd heard it recently. He tapped the flight deck tablet and opened a folder he kept for his own reading. Company updates, press clippings, quarterly memos. He scrolled quickly until he found it. Polaris Foundation Annual Gala, honoring community heroes. His eyes scanned the list, and there it was. Special guest, Mrs. Clara Washington, honored for her lifetime of service in maternal health care and community outreach. Mother of CEO Malcolm Washington. He let out a soft whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Captain Rourke glanced over. "Something wrong?" "Not wrong," Nolan replied. "Just surprising." He turned the tablet around. Rourke read, eyebrows slowly rising. "You're saying that lady in 2A is the CEO's mother?" Nolan nodded. "Looks like it." The captain leaned back in his seat, exhaling. "Someone's gonna be in trouble." In the cabin, Clara continued to stare out the window. The plane had reached cruising altitude, but she felt no weightlessness. The pressure in her chest hadn't eased. It pressed harder, not from fear, but from awareness. Something had shifted. She could feel it in the way Maria returned, quieter now, her hands more careful as she passed napkins. She could feel it in the hush that settled over the cabin like early fog. She knew what it was. People were starting to remember. That's how the world worked. At first, you're invisible. Then, when the right title or connection is revealed, they all suddenly see you and act like they always had. But Clara didn't want recognition through borrowed power. She didn't need her son's name to validate her presence. She simply wanted respect. Basic, humane, equal. She thought about last year's gala. It had been Malcolm's idea. "You deserve it," he had told her, adjusting her shawl before they entered the grand ballroom in Chicago. "Not just for raising me, for everything you've done for others." Clara had been overwhelmed that night. Bright lights, photographers, applause. The Polaris Foundation had launched its new scholarship program, Clara Scholars, supporting minority students in healthcare. She had stood at the podium, hands trembling, sharing stories from her 30 years as a midwife. Not statistics, stories. About mothers who came in bleeding and terrified. About fathers who cried for the first time. About babies named after hope and survival. She had spoken for only 5 minutes, but the standing ovation had lasted longer. Malcolm had kissed her forehead afterward. "You changed the whole room, Mama." Now, seated in 2A, Clara wondered if Lindsay had ever seen that video. If she would recognize the woman she had humiliated just hours before, on a screen, in a dress, on a stage. Probably not. People like Lindsay didn't see women like Clara until it was too late. At the back of the cabin, Lindsay stood at the crew station, her hands shaking slightly as she refreshed the manifest. Clara Washington, mother, midwife, executive affiliate. She closed her eyes, jaw clenched. This couldn't be happening. Not on her watch. She had served this route a dozen times without incident. But today, she had let her assumptions walk in before professionalism, and now it might cost her everything. She thought back, hard, to her own upbringing. Her mother had always talked about the woman who saved her. The story had been passed down like a family relic. About how she nearly died giving birth to Lindsay. About how a black nurse had stepped in, taken control when the doctor panicked. About how that woman had smiled and whispered, "Breathe, just breathe." She had said the woman's name, too. It wasn't possible, was it? Lindsay's pulse thundered in her ears. Erin watched everything. She saw the flight crew's nervous glances, the sudden softening in tone. She watched Maria glance down at the manifest on the tablet again and again, as if trying to memorize a secret. Something was happening behind the curtain. She pulled out her phone, discreetly scrolling through news headlines. And there it was. CEO of Polaris Airlines to honor his mother at annual gala, a celebration of Clara Washington's legacy. The article included photos. One in particular struck her. Clara, in a powder blue gown, standing beside Malcolm, smiling with that same quiet dignity she now wore in seat 2A. Erin's breath caught. She knew then, this wasn't just a story about airline policy or rudeness. This was something bigger, something systemic, something important. She opened her notebook and wrote 2 words at the top of the page. Invisible royalty. Clara shifted slightly in her seat, reaching into her handbag with a calm that belied the storm gathering inside her. The glass of sparkling water on her tray sat untouched. Her fingers brushed past her worn poetry book and found the phone. The moment she pressed the button, the screen lit up, reflecting her face in the darkened cabin. There, pinned at the top of her contacts, was one name: Malcolm. She hesitated for a second, not out of doubt, but out of principle. She had spent her life solving her own problems, cleaning up messes others made without ever making noise about it. She wasn't one to call for help. She had been the help. But this wasn't just about a seat. This was about a message sent in silence, from people like Lindsay, from men like Greg, from a world that still whispered, "You don't belong here." She tapped the screen. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Clara exhaled slowly, gripping the device tighter. The fourth ring. Then, voicemail. A recording played, Malcolm's deep voice clipped and professional. "You've reached Malcolm Washington. I'm unavailable at the moment. Please leave a message." Clara's hand fell gently to her lap. For a moment, the world shrank again. The whispers around her disappeared. The air became still, stagnant. She hadn't realized how much hope she'd pinned on hearing his voice. Not to fight for her, just to remind her that someone still saw her, still believed her story mattered. Maria, passing by with the service cart, noticed Clara's hand trembling. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she whispered. Clara nodded faintly. "I'm fine, thank you." But her eyes betrayed her. There was no anger, no outrage, just a quiet ache. A weary kind of disappointment, like someone who had waited too long at a train station, watching other people leave while her own train never arrived. She put the phone down, didn't leave a voicemail. She didn't want to burden Malcolm, not during business hours, not with her emotions. "Maybe he's in a meeting," she murmured, half to herself, half to the memory of his voice. 3 rows ahead, Greg Sullivan leaned toward Lindsay and chuckled under his breath. "She really tried to call someone?" he whispered. Lindsay's mouth twisted into a tight smile. "Probably her grandson or some local pastor." Greg snorted. "Poor lady. Must have thought that one call would flip the world upside down." Lindsay's voice rose just enough to carry. "Ma'am," she said, stepping back toward Clara's row, her smile venomous now, her tone oozing false sweetness. "You know, even if you call the President of the United States, he won't be able to help you sit in a seat you didn't earn." Her voice landed like a slap across the cabin. Passengers turned. Some grinned. Some glanced away. Ashamed, they found it entertaining. Erin froze in her seat, fists clenched in her lap. Clara looked up slowly, not startled, not even surprised. She tilted her head, studying Lindsay the way an old doctor might examine an aggressive infection. "I didn't call the president," she said gently. "I called my son." Lindsay blinked. "And what does your son do?" Clara gave the softest shrug. "You'll find out soon enough." Her voice wasn't threatening. It wasn't angry. It simply was. That made it all the more unsettling. At the front of the aircraft, the first officer stepped into the aisle, whispering something to a gate agent who had boarded late. A brief, hurried exchange. The agent looked down at his phone and nodded quickly. Whatever was happening, it was in motion. In Chicago, thousands of feet above ground in a glass and steel skyscraper, Malcolm Washington sat at the head of a massive boardroom table. Executives flanked him on both sides, their ties tight, their expressions tighter. A multi-million-dollar merger was being discussed. Charts, projections, and risk profiles filled the room. But Malcolm's focus wasn't on the screen in front of him. His phone vibrated once. He didn't check it. Then again, then again. It was rare that anyone dared interrupt him during meetings, but something gnawed at him. A small pull in his chest, a whisper he couldn't explain. He reached into his jacket, glanced at the screen. Missed call, Mom. No voicemail, no message, just the silence of her name. He stood abruptly. "Gentlemen," he said, cutting off a middle-aged executive mid-sentence. "I need to step out." No one questioned him. When Malcolm left a room, it was with such focus that even silence followed. He stepped into his private office and called back. It rang. No answer. Back on the plane, Clara returned the phone to her purse, her hands composed now. She stared out the window, not to see the clouds, but to find stillness again. That's what this seat had become. A test of stillness, of resilience. It wasn't about reclining beds or caviar. It was about sitting where you belonged and not letting anyone convince you otherwise. And in this moment, even though she sat alone, even though her son hadn't answered, Clara felt the weight of every woman who had ever been pushed to the back of the room. Every man told to wait. Every child told, not yet. She was sitting for them too. Erin watched in awe. She had covered protests, political hearings, even war zones. But never had she seen someone command a room without raising her voice, without standing, without fighting. Clara had simply stayed seated. And in that, she was stronger than any scream. Maria walked past again, quietly slipping a note onto Clara's tray. It was scribbled in small handwriting. "We're with you." Clara didn't look around. She just smiled. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft prepared for final departure. Seatbelts clicked, phones were silenced, and the hum of anticipation settled into a low drone. Clara remained seated, her hands folded tightly over her lap, her phone now tucked away. She stared ahead, but her eyes were distant, locked on something unseen. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came through, calm and measured. "We've been asked to delay takeoff for a few more minutes. We are awaiting the arrival of a VIP guest boarding this flight. Thank you for your patience." There was a beat of silence. Then the murmurs began. "A VIP? Who boards this late? Must be someone famous. Or government." Whispers spread like wildfire, weaving between the polished suits and sparkling jewelry of first class. Some rolled their eyes. Others leaned toward their windows, hoping to catch a glimpse through the jet bridge. Lindsay, who had just finished resetting the service cart, stiffened. She smoothed her uniform with deliberate grace, then checked her lipstick in the reflective glass of the galley wall. With a final breath, she turned to Maria. "VIP," she repeated, as if savoring the letters. "Probably a Polaris executive, or maybe someone from FAA. Let's be on point." Maria didn't respond. Lindsay glanced toward Clara. She was still seated in 2A, unmoving, serene in the middle of the storm she had quietly summoned. Clara, for her part, didn't flinch at the announcement. She only murmured, so quietly it could have been mistaken for a breath, "My son always keeps his word." Her fingers closed gently over her phone again, not to use it, but to feel its weight, as if it connected her to something bigger than herself. At the front of the cabin, Erin glanced up from her laptop. Her journalistic instincts flared. "VIP?" she whispered under her breath, fingers already drafting a headline she might not even publish yet. "Anonymous disruption triggers executive delay." It was a hunch, but it had teeth. Because it wasn't just the delay. It was the way Lindsay had changed. The way Maria's hands had grown hesitant. Something was happening beyond what was visible. A quiet recalibration of power. Erin watched Lindsay post at the cabin's entrance, standing tall, her posture suddenly formal. She was ready to greet someone important. But who? 10 minutes passed. Then a sound echoed through the jet bridge. A set of hurried footsteps. A male voice barked orders to someone on the ground crew. Then, the figure appeared. Not a celebrity, not a government official, not Malcolm Washington, but a tall, sharply dressed black man in a gray three-piece suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase. His expression was focused, but not flustered. His pace was brisk, but not panicked. Maria was the first to recognize him. She gasped. It was Andre Hale, executive assistant and chief liaison to Malcolm Washington. He didn't wait for permission. He stepped directly into the cabin, eyes scanning quickly. Then he spotted Lindsay and approached without pause. "Ms. Myers?" he asked, voice low but firm. Lindsay blinked, caught off guard. "Yes?" He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is a formal summons. Effective immediately, you are requested to attend a closed-door crew review session in the forward lounge. Your presence is non-negotiable. Please bring your tablet and personnel badge." The air in the cabin dropped a degree. "What is this about?" she asked, trying to hold her composure. "You'll be briefed inside," Andre replied. "Captain Rourke has been informed. A Polaris compliance officer is en route to conduct the session virtually." Lindsay faltered for the first time. I have a cabin to run." "You'll be temporarily relieved," he said simply, stepping aside to make way. "Please." Behind her, Maria stood frozen, her eyes wide. Lindsay's mouth opened, then closed. With robotic movements, she reached for her tablet, her steps slower now, the pride in her gait cracking under the weight of confusion. She walked toward the curtain that separated first class from the galley, disappearing from view. The whispers this time were different, not amused, not smug, uneasy. Clara didn't move. She didn't even blink. But inside, something shifted. She hadn't expected Andre. She had expected her son. But then again, Malcolm had always known how to move behind the scenes, like her. Quiet, precise, effective. A low voice came from the aisle. "Mrs. Washington?" Clara looked up. Andre stood before her now, a gentle smile replacing the businesslike mask he wore moments earlier. She nodded. "Andre, I thought he was in Chicago." "He is," Andre said. "He asked me to get on the first available flight. I was already at the airport when he called. He sends his love, and his apologies for not getting to you first." Clara's eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. "He's busy. I understand." Andre leaned in slightly. "He's more than busy. He's furious. He's pausing an entire board meeting." Clara's lips curved into a faint smile. "That sounds like him." Andre stood straight again. "We'll handle this, ma'am. Every word, every action, it's being documented. Polaris doesn't tolerate what happened to you today." Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was permission. Back in the galley, Lindsay sat stiffly in the forward lounge, the door shut behind her. The captain had joined her, along with 2 other crew members. A tablet screen lit up with a Polaris logo. Then the compliance officer's face appeared. Her voice was cool, professional. "Ms. Myers, we'll begin this session by asking you to recount in full detail the interaction you had with passenger Clara Washington, seated in 2A. Lindsay swallowed hard. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. Back in the cabin, Maria approached Clara with a refreshed towel and a quiet whisper. "Would you like anything else to drink, Mrs. Washington?" Clara's brows lifted slightly. "So formal now." Maria's cheeks flushed. I wanted to do this right." Clara gave a nod. "Then just treat me like anyone else." Maria smiled, softer this time. "That's the plan." And just like that, something invisible shifted again, not just on the plane, but in the atmosphere surrounding it. The system, so long built to exclude, to excuse, to overlook, had been touched, and it was starting to tremble. The cabin was quiet again, though this time it was the quiet of a held breath. Every passenger felt it, even those who'd spent the last hour pretending to be above the tension. Something was coming. Clara remained in her seat, her shoulders relaxed, but her heart ticked a little faster now. She had not called a storm. She had merely waited. And now, as the final echo of authority rippled down the fuselage, the eye of that storm was arriving. A rustle passed through the galley curtain. Then, like a shadow becoming flesh, a man stepped into the cabin. He was tall, dark-skinned, impeccably dressed in a jet-black tailored suit with a muted navy tie. No name badge, no announcement. But the air shifted the moment he entered. Malcolm Washington didn't have to speak. People moved, instinctively. A flight attendant froze mid-step. A passenger lowered their phone. Even Greg Sullivan, who had just ordered a second glass of champagne, paused, sensing something, someone, bigger than anything he understood was in the room now. Malcolm's gaze swept the cabin, calm but searching. And then he saw her. Mom. His voice was a mix of relief and rage, tenderness and steel. Clara stood slowly, as if time had returned to her. "Malcolm, don't," she said softly. "I'm fine." He reached her in 3 strides and gently took her hand, pressing it between both of his like he used to when he was a boy after a nightmare. She gave his hand a squeeze. "You didn't have to come." "Yes," he said, voice low. "I did." Malcolm turned then, to the front of the cabin, eyes locking onto Lindsay, who had just emerged from the internal review, her face pale, her lips pressed into a hard line. Their eyes met. For a moment, nothing was said. Then Malcolm spoke, his voice clear, calm, but so deeply controlled it carried more weight than shouting ever could. "You're the one who tried to eject my mother from her seat?" Lindsay tried to form a response, but no sound came out. Clara placed a hand on his arm. "Please, not here, not like this." But Malcolm didn't look away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black leather card holder, and retrieved a single minimalist business card. He turned it toward Lindsay, letting the cabin see the name in clean silver lettering. Malcolm Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Polaris Airlines. The silence was absolute. Passengers leaned forward. Some gasped. Erin, from her seat, typed furiously, recording every movement, every breath. Maria's eyes widened. Greg Sullivan sank lower in his seat, his jaw tightening. Lindsay's entire body stiffened. I didn't know." "No," Malcolm said. "You didn't care." Clara gripped his wrist gently. "Malcolm, don't humiliate her. That's not who we are." Malcolm inhaled, held it, and then, unexpectedly, he turned slightly, facing the cabin. "I'm not here to make a scene," he said. "This isn't about revenge. It's about repair." He turned back to Lindsay. "In a few minutes, this plane will leave the gate," he said. "And I'm going to let that happen, because no one here should be punished for your mistake, except you." Lindsay's lips trembled. "Are you removing me?" Malcolm paused. Then came the twist. "No," he said. "I'm giving you a choice." He reached into his inside jacket pocket and handed her a folded document. It was a printed memo, sealed with Polaris Airlines' executive crest. "This is an official notice," he said. "You are to be relieved of in-cabin duties for the remainder of the flight. You may sit in the forward lounge. You will not speak to passengers. You will not serve. And you will not approach my mother again." Lindsay blinked, confused. "And if I refuse?" Malcolm's voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Then your suspension will be immediate and public. And believe me, you don't want the world watching your apology go viral." A pause. Lindsay took the paper, slowly stepping back toward the curtain. To the rest of the cabin, it looked almost dignified, like she had chosen to leave. And that's exactly what Malcolm intended. Clara looked at her son, eyes questioning. He leaned in. "Let her go quietly. The headlines will be loud enough." Clara nodded once, pride in her eyes. As Lindsay disappeared behind the curtain, a murmur swelled in the cabin. Not of gossip this time, but awe. The CEO of an international airline had just walked onto a commercial flight to defend his mother, and done it with silence sharper than steel. Malcolm turned back to the other passengers. "My mother's name is Clara Washington," he said, his voice measured. "She's a retired midwife who has delivered over 600 babies. She's spent her life helping others breathe into theirs." He looked directly at Greg Sullivan, whose face had gone red. "Some of you may have looked at her today and seen someone who didn't belong here," Malcolm continued. "But let me be clear. The only reason any of you are sitting comfortably on this aircraft is because of people like her." He didn't need to say more. He simply returned to his mother's side, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said, "Let's fly." Clara, for once, had no words, just the softest smile, and a single tear that slipped down her cheek, not from pain, but from vindication. The silence after Malcolm's words stretched thick across the cabin. Passengers avoided eye contact with Clara. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others looked at their hands, their trays. Anything but the woman they'd spent the last hour dismissing with glances or silence. Malcolm, however, wasn't finished. His eyes moved deliberately across the room until they landed on Greg Sullivan. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, his voice now sharper, carrying the edge of formal address. "We haven't been introduced, though I believe our company's just signed a fairly sizable contract last quarter." Greg stiffened. "Mr. Washington," he said, voice hoarse, half standing as if unsure of the rules now. Yes, It's an honor. Malcolm didn't let him finish. You want the honor of feeding Polaris passengers? He said. Of representing our values on every tray, in every bite served. And yet, I witnessed you laughing, mocking, and condoning the public mistreatment of a paying customer who also happens to be my mother. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Greg's jaw twitched. He sat down fast, as if gravity had doubled just around his seat. I didn't mean... Malcolm raised a hand. This isn't about intent, he said. It's about culture, about what kind of behavior we reward or ignore. Greg's hands fumbled with the cuffs of his sleeves, his voice barely audible. I didn't know who she was. Exactly, Malcolm replied, ice lacing each syllable. You treated her like that because you didn't know who she was. That line landed like a hammer. Clara stayed seated, her face unreadable, but her hands had stopped trembling. Malcolm didn't press further. He turned and walked back to his seat behind Clara, never raising his voice, never needing to. But the hierarchy in that cabin? Cracked. Greg reached for his champagne, only to realize his hand was visibly shaking. He put it down. His face was flushed now, not from embarrassment, but from the terrifying realization of what he'd done. And to whom? The $15 million catering contract with Polaris wasn't just a win. It was a lifeline. His company had overextended, betting on this partnership as its anchor client. If it crumbled, he knew. Everything else would follow. Across the aisle, Erin watched quietly. Her gaze didn't waver. Her fingers rested on her lap, not on the laptop anymore, but on the discreet recording device hidden in her blazer pocket. She had been recording since boarding. From the moment Clara stepped into first class, Erin had observed, noted, documented. She hadn't known who Clara was at first, but she had seen enough of the world, of these rooms, to recognize the pattern. Erin wasn't just a concerned passenger. She wasn't a consultant. She was an investigative journalist, freelancing for one of the largest international news outlets. Her ongoing story. The unseen class, casual discrimination at 30,000 feet. Clara had been a case study until she became something more, a symbol. Erin had intended to quietly observe, gather stories, speak to crew off record. But this entire flight was no longer just evidence. It was a feature. It was a statement. And now, Erin realized, it was history in real time. In the galley, Maria leaned against the wall, trying to breathe through the weight of everything that had happened. She had grown used to Lindsay's microaggressions. She'd watched countless moments of subtle mistreatment brushed off, laughed away, rationalized. But this felt different. This felt like a breaking point. She opened the crew app, found Clara's name in the manifest again, and clicked into the VIP status log. There it was, noted, approved, and cleared by Malcolm Washington's office. Maria felt a rush of heat behind her eyes. She stepped forward, walked back into the cabin, and approached Clara's seat. "Would you like your meal now, ma'am?" she asked softly. Clara looked up, eyes kind but sharp. "Whatever everyone else is having will be just fine," Maria nodded. "Of course." This time she poured the water with care, folded the napkin just right. Respect wasn't complicated. It just had to be chosen. In the back of the cabin, Lindsay sat alone in the forward lounge, the door pulled shut. She could hear nothing, but she felt everything. Her ears rang, not with sound, but memory. Greg's laughter, Clara's voice, Malcolm's question. "You're the one who tried to eject my mother from her seat?" She stared at the tablet in front of her. No one had told her if she was still employed. No one had even asked for her version of events. She considered sending an apology message to Clara, then decided against it. It was too late for that. Back in 2A, Clara finally unfolded her tray. She looked up at her son. "You didn't have to embarrass him like that," she said gently. "I didn't," Malcolm replied. "He embarrassed himself." She smiled slightly. "Still, that was quite a show." Malcolm leaned closer. It wasn't a show. It was a reckoning. Clara nodded slowly. Then, softly, she said, "Then let it end with grace." Erin opened a new document. She titled it simply, "The Flight That Changed Everything." She didn't just want to capture Clara's dignity. She wanted the world to remember it. Because in that moment, in seat 2A, sat a woman who had endured public humiliation without raising her voice, and had restored her honor not with fury, but with presence. Erin added a note beneath the headline. Sometimes, revolution doesn't come with fists or slogans. Sometimes, it wears floral print and holds a poem in its purse. The plane had only just touched down in Paris when the notifications started flooding in. Clara's phone, usually silent save for the occasional call from Malcolm or a friend from church, began buzzing non-stop on the car ride from the airport. At first, she assumed it was family, maybe Malcolm's team updating her itinerary. But then she glanced at the screen. Hundreds of missed notifications, messages, mentions, emails, news alerts. Her name, Clara Washington, was trending. Maria had mentioned something about people recording the incident, and Erin had given a gentle warning. This may become public. But Clara hadn't expected this. Not the headlines, not the international storm. She sat in the back seat of the car, Malcolm beside her, scrolling through his phone with furrowed brows. His jaw clenched tighter with each refresh. "That fly with dignity is exploding," he muttered. "The press picked it up before we even landed." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" Malcolm turned the screen toward her. A viral video filled the screen. It showed Clara being pointed at, Lindsay's voice sharp, mocking, Clara remaining calm. Malcolm arriving. The reveal of the CEO card. The silence of the cabin. The grace with which Clara held her place. People had captured everything from multiple angles. Millions of views within hours. There were tweets. "This woman is the quiet power we all need." Clara Washington didn't just sit. She stood for all of us, from her seat. Respect isn't earned by class. It's earned by character. #fly with dignity. Instagram reels, TikToks, Reddit threads, think pieces, video essays, political commentary, and the media followed. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, the New York Times. Even satirical sites ran headlines like, "Midwife takes down mid-air madness." Malcolm's PR team scrambled. Polaris released a formal statement. Polaris Airlines is conducting a full internal review of the incident involving passenger Clara Washington. We remain committed to inclusivity, dignity, and respect for all travelers. By afternoon, the first corporate domino fell. Sullivan Logistics, Greg's company, received a polite but firm termination notice from Polaris Legal. The contract was voided due to conflict with company values and recent behavior inconsistent with partner expectations. By evening, 2 more vendors reached out to Polaris voluntarily, requesting a meeting to reaffirm diversity commitments. Greg's photo began circulating alongside headlines like, "Caterer Caught in Class Clash." He tried to issue a statement, something generic about misunderstanding, but it only added fuel. Screenshots of his mocking smile from the flight were posted everywhere. He had become a symbol, not of power, but of what power shouldn't look like. Lindsay's situation was worse. Polaris officially suspended her without pay, pending internal review. Her face had become an unwilling meme. She was labeled everything from Sky Karen to Queen of Microaggressions. Her social media accounts were shut down after thousands of angry messages flooded her inbox. News vans parked outside her suburban home. Neighbors stared. Her parents didn't return her calls. Lindsay locked the doors and closed the curtains, hoping to ride out the storm. But it was only just beginning. Clara sat quietly on the hotel balcony that night, overlooking the Paris skyline. The Eiffel Tower glimmered in the distance, but her eyes weren't on the lights. She held her phone, scrolling slowly. So many messages. Some from strangers, some deeply personal. A nurse from Detroit thanking her for standing up. A teenage girl writing, "You look like my grandma," I've never seen someone like us go viral for something good." A white business executive who confessed, "I never knew how subtle cruelty could look until I saw that video." Clara closed her eyes and let the weight of it sink in. She didn't ask for any of this. She hadn't spoken in anger. She hadn't even meant to go viral. All she did was sit in the seat her son had gifted her. That was all. But in a world where quiet dignity had become rare, that was enough to make noise. Then, the twist. Malcolm knocked once and entered her room. "There's something I need to show you," he said, jaw tight. Clara followed him into the suite's small living area. He turned the TV on. A video was playing. Her. But something was wrong. In this version, the audio had been edited. Her calm reply had been spliced together with unrelated lines, making her sound confrontational. There were fake subtitles. Her tone had been digitally altered to sound sharp, rude. The caption read, "Exposed, viral woman actually aggressive, real video here." Malcolm muted the sound. The clips being pushed by 3 anonymous accounts, all connected to a network known for fake news and disinformation. Clara blinked slowly. "So they're saying I faked it?" He nodded. "Some people are trying to twist it, make you the aggressor. Say this was a PR stunt, that I orchestrated it for brand exposure." Clara exhaled. "Of course they are." He looked at her. "I'm pulling legal. Erin's providing her original footage. We'll kill this fast." But Clara didn't seem shaken. Instead, she asked, "Will it matter?" Malcolm didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Perception spreads faster than facts. Online, the tide began to shift slightly. Comment sections grew hostile. "She acted like a victim, but look how she really talks. Bet she planned the whole thing with her CEO's son. Another race-baiting performance. Don't fall for it." The hashtag split. Fly with Dignity remained strong, but now it was joined by #Fly with Facts. The internet had turned Clara into a battlefield. And the war wasn't about her. It was about what she represented. That night, alone again on the balcony, Clara opened her poetry book. "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies." She smiled faintly at the line. She had lived long enough to know one thing. Lies make noise, but truth outlasts them. The morning after the edited clip began circulating, Erin sat cross-legged on her hotel bed, laptop open, earbuds in, her eyes fierce with focus. She'd barely slept. The injustice ignited something primal in her. She had witnessed the incident with her own eyes, recorded it from the start, and knew the truth. Now they were calling Clara a liar? No, not on her watch. Erin uploaded her footage, unedited, raw, time-stamped, from the moment Clara entered the plane to Malcolm's final words before takeoff. Every detail captured: Clara's soft tone, Lindsay's dismissive sneers, Greg's smug laughter, Clara's refusal to be humiliated, calm, dignified, unmoving. She wrote a short caption: "Here is the full, uncut footage. No voice raised, no aggression, just grace in the face of arrogance. Let the truth speak for itself. #Fly with Dignity." Then she hit post. It took less than an hour. The backlash against Clara's accusers began to crumble. Prominent voices who had retweeted the fake clip now issued public apologies. Fact-checking accounts picked apart the doctored video. Side-by-side comparisons exposed the manipulations. Pitch shifts, sliced phrases, false subtitles. Comment sections flipped. "I feel sick for believing the fake video. She was the picture of grace. The rest of us need to apologize. She didn't say a word louder than a whisper. And still, they tried to ruin her." Within 3 hours, the original slanderous accounts were suspended. By noon, YouTube and Twitter had removed the fake video entirely. But the damage lingered. The attempt to smear Clara had exposed how fragile truth could be and how quickly dignity could be stolen. Again. Malcolm called an emergency press conference at Polaris headquarters in Chicago. No lawyers, no PR filters, just himself, a podium. and a large backdrop bearing the Polaris logo. Service, integrity, humanity. Journalists packed the room. Cameras rolled. Microphones blinked red. He stepped up to the mic and didn't speak from a script. "My name is Malcolm Washington," he began, voice steady. "I'm the CEO of Polaris Airlines, and I'm here today not to defend a company, but to honor a person." He paused. "Yesterday, my mother, Clara Washington, was publicly humiliated, misrepresented, and then attacked online for simply existing in a space she had every right to be." Flashes went off. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't retaliate. She didn't threaten anyone. And yet, she was called a fraud, a manipulator, a liar. He inhaled slowly. "I want to say this clearly, to everyone watching. Those lies were just that. Lies." He stepped aside briefly as Erin was invited to the podium. She introduced herself as an independent journalist, then uploaded her raw footage to the screens for the room to see. There was no commentary, no editing, just truth. As Clara's image appeared on screen, poised, silent, calm, the room quieted. Reporters watched in real time what so many online had already seen. And when the video ended, Malcolm stepped back to the microphone. "Polaris Airlines owes Mrs. Washington an apology," he said. "And so do all of us who benefit from the labor, the silence, and the strength of women like her." He looked straight into the camera. "Mom," he said, voice thick, "I'm sorry I wasn't on that plane when it happened. I'm sorry you had to carry this burden, even for a moment." A pause. "And thank you for never raising your voice, even when the world raised its hand against you." The room stood in ovation, not because they were instructed to, but because the truth had been laid bare, and it demanded reverence. Back in Paris, Clara watched the conference from the hotel suite. She sat alone, in the quiet. When Malcolm said, "Mom, I'm sorry," she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the words more than hearing them. She didn't cry. She had done that already. Now, she simply exhaled, not in relief, but release. 2 days later, Malcolm's assistant delivered a formal letter to Clara's room, embossed, sealed with the Polaris emblem. Inside was an invitation. The Polaris Board of Directors would be honored to welcome Mrs. Clara Washington as a founding member of the newly established Human Dignity Advisory Council. Your life, legacy, and leadership embody the values we seek to promote in all corners of our company. Attached was a proposed charter, travel benefits, speaking engagements, a seat at the decision-making table. Clara read it carefully, twice, then set it down. Later that evening, she called Malcolm. "You read the offer?" he asked. "I did," she replied. "And?" "I'm honored," she said. "Truly." Malcolm hesitated. "But I don't need a title," she said softly. "I don't need a seat at any table." He paused. "You earned it," she smiled. "No, what I want can't be given by a board, or a council, or a company." Malcolm was quiet. "I want dignity," Clara continued. "Not just for me. For the next person who walks onto a plane in sneakers. For the young man in a hoodie. For the woman in a second-hand dress. I want the people who come after me to be seen, not because of who they know, but because of who they are." Her voice remained calm, but it carried power. "I don't need a position," she finished. "I need change." Malcolm exhaled on the other end. "You always know how to say things better than me." She chuckled. "That's because I had fewer people to listen to me, so I learned to speak when it counted." That night, Clara returned to the balcony. No camera lights, no reporters, just her and the stars. She opened her book once more, this time not to distract, but to celebrate. "Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise," she whispered the last line to herself. "I rise." The boardroom was full, but no one dared speak. Polaris Airlines executive team sat in tense anticipation as Malcolm Washington stood at the head of the long glass table, looking not just like a CEO, but like a man reborn with purpose. He wore no tie, no slide deck, no PR specialist beside him. Just a single printed sheet of paper in his hand, folded once down the center. "This," he began, holding it up, "is not a policy. It's not a public relations stunt, and it's not a temporary bandage." He paused, letting the room adjust to the weight of his words. "This is a promise." He placed the paper on the table. "The Clara Code." Gasps whispered through the room. "The Clara Code," he continued, "is a new operational charter that will be implemented across every level of Polaris Airlines, from check-in to cockpit. It is built on one simple principle: dignity is non-negotiable. No slides were needed. He walked them through it. Mandatory empathy training for all employees. A customer dignity board with real veto power over policy. A zero-tolerance clause not only for overt discrimination, but for passive complicity. Anonymous reporting channels. Rewards for acts of integrity, not just efficiency. "And yes," Malcolm added, "it's going to cost us money. Time, maybe even some business partners." He looked around the room, scanning the eyes of men and women who had grown accustomed to status quo. "Then let it cost," he said, "because what we've already paid in silence is far greater." The announcement hit media within hours. Polaris Airlines was no longer trending for scandal, but for systemic change. News outlets picked it up globally. From passenger to policy, Clara's legacy sparks airline reform. The Clara Code, a new era of respect in the skies. The airline's stock dipped briefly, then rebounded sharply as public sentiment flooded in with support. Major corporations called for consultations on how to build similar programs, but Malcolm wasn't done. 1 week later, he stood again before a crowd, this time in a sunlit hall in Atlanta. Rows of students, parents, and educators gathered in the historic district, flanked by portraits of civil rights leaders and legacy builders. Behind Malcolm stood a simple banner: the Clara Foundation, for dignity, for dreams. The scholarship program, seeded with $5 million from Polaris and another $3 million in private donations, would provide full tuition and mentorship for underrepresented youth entering aviation, healthcare, and service industries. This foundation, Malcolm told the crowd, isn't about fixing a moment. It's about building a future. And that future is made of names like Clara, unspoken, uncelebrated, but unforgettable. In the front row, Clara sat silently, her floral dress swaying in the fan breeze, hands clasped, eyes damp. She had refused to give a speech. "Let the kids shine," she said. But as they called the first scholarship recipient, a black girl from Alabama who had always dreamed of becoming a pilot, Clara stood to embrace her. The cameras clicked, but Clara's focus stayed on the girl. "You're going to fly farther than we ever could," she whispered. Not far from that celebration, in a beige office with blinds drawn tight, Greg Sullivan read his final audit report. Losses exceeded projections. His logistics firm had hemorrhaged clients since the Polaris termination. A pending lawsuit over a breach of ethics threatened to freeze remaining assets. A quiet bankruptcy loomed. He sat at his desk, alone, the silence heavy. No one returned his calls. Reputation, it turned out, was louder than branding. And the man who once sipped champagne above the clouds now drank flat coffee, waiting for another deal that might never come. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburb, Lindsay Myers sat at her kitchen table, staring at a page she had rewritten 6 times. It was an apology letter. Not the corporate kind. A real one. Raw, uneven, honest. She had typed, deleted, cried, cursed, and then written again. Her words weren't excuses, just admissions. She remembered her mother's story, about a nurse who had saved her life during delivery, about the name she had mentioned only once, Clara. "I think it was Clara," her mother had said. a woman with calm hands and kind eyes. Lindsay never forgot that line. And now, after weeks of media exile, job applications ignored, and nights sleepless, she finally understood what it meant. She printed the letter, signed it, mailed it. Days passed. Then, one morning, a thin envelope arrived at Lindsay's door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed. No greeting, no signature, just a poem. By Maya Angelou. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Lindsay read it once. Then again, she folded it slowly and cried, not because she was forgiven, but because she had been seen. At her own kitchen table in Harlem, Clara folded the letter she had received, rereading the last line. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the chance to change. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some answers live in silence. Some lessons come wrapped in poetry. The city moved on, the world kept spinning, but something, somewhere, had changed. Because from the ashes of public humiliation and corporate reckoning, something real had been built. Not just a code, not just a foundation, not just headlines, but a model of what it looks like when quiet dignity meets unshakable truth and wins. The Eiffel Tower shimmered in the distance, a beacon of gold against the velvet curtain of night. From the grand arched window of her suite at the George V, Clara Washington sat still, her eyes drinking in the city of light as if trying to memorize its rhythm. Behind her, the sounds of the gala murmured like a soft tide. Laughter, clinking glasses, music filtered through velvet curtains. But Clara wanted a moment alone. Just her, the Parisian skyline, and the quiet that came after the storm. She wore a soft indigo gown, simple but elegant. Her silver curls framed her face like a crown of quiet strength. Around her neck, a small gold pin shaped like a pair of wings, gifted by Polaris in honor of the foundation that now bore her name. She had never imagined her life would bring her here, not to Paris, not to the center of a movement. She had boarded that flight weeks ago with nothing but a first-class ticket, a paperback book, and the hope for a peaceful trip. Instead, the world had handed her something she hadn't asked for, but somehow had always carried the weight of a voice. The ballroom was ready. Lavish chandeliers sparkled above polished marble. The guests had gathered, donors, executives, scholarship recipients, journalists. At the far end, a raised platform with a single podium stood beneath a projected image, the Clara Foundation, lighting the way for those told to wait. Malcolm stood near the stage, checking his watch. The program was timed, but he didn't rush. Tonight wasn't about press. It wasn't about metrics. It was about her. Clara entered the ballroom to a hush, not of silence, but of reverence. No music played. No introduction announced her, but the crowd parted like water around her as she walked to the stage, steps measured, eyes forward. At the podium, she paused. No papers, no teleprompter, just breath, then voice. When I was a little girl, she began, I used to dream about flying. She smiled softly. Not on airplanes. That seemed too far-fetched. I just wanted to float, above expectations, above judgment, above the weight the world put on my shoulders before I even knew how to spell my name. She paused. I didn't grow up wanting power. I grew up wanting peace, and respect, and space, just enough to breathe. A few people wiped their eyes already. When I boarded that plane, I didn't ask to be seen as anything special. I just wanted the seat my son bought me, the one he said I deserved. Her voice didn't tremble, it carried. Some people said I was strong, some said I was silent, some said I was staged, but I wasn't any of those things. She looked out into the crowd. I was just tired of shrinking to make others feel tall, tired of folding so others could stretch. A tear slid down a young woman's cheek in the front row. Clara smiled gently. We didn't start this foundation to take anything back. We're not here to take revenge. We're here to make room. A pause. Because we don't want power. She leaned slightly forward. We just want the right to be people. The room stood before she could finish her final sentence. A standing ovation, not forced, not prompted, just born from something real. Clara stepped back from the mic. Malcolm met her at the edge of the stage. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if the world could still bruise her if he let go. And in that embrace, tight, quiet, infinite, the whole room wept. Not because of tragedy, but because of truth. Later that night, as the ballroom emptied and the flowers wilted slightly in their vases, Clara sat back in her suite, her shoes off, her feet finally resting. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find Erin standing there, a slim, wrapped package in her hands. "I hope I'm not intruding," Erin said, her voice softer than usual. "Of course not," Clara replied, stepping aside. Erin handed her the bundle. "This is for you." Clara unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a manuscript. The cover page read, "The Flight Without a Ticket. The Memoir of Clara Washington." Her eyes widened. "What is this?" Erin smiled. "It's yours, all of it. Your words, your silence, your impact. I've compiled every moment, every quote, every response. The world needs to know the full story." Clara held the pages as if they were something fragile. "I never meant to make history," she said quietly. "Exactly," Erin replied. "That's why it matters." They sat together for a while. No cameras, no questions. Just two women who had witnessed the best and worst of the skies, now grounded in something bigger. The next morning, as the sun rose over Paris, Clara stood once again at the window. The world was still flawed. But now, somewhere out there, a child would read about a woman in seat 2A, a woman who sat when others said stand, who whispered when the world shouted, who made space not just for herself, but for everyone told to wait. And in that quiet, golden dawn, Clara whispered to the city, "We rise."